How do I find an intimate partner that's of a higher level resonance? And how can I make my intimate partnership better? Are two questions that I often get. It can be a challenge to find an intimate partner that you want to grow, play, and adventure with. And it's an altogether different challenge to make an existing partnership even better. My name is Karen Cheong. Today I'm here with my husband, Chris. Chris and I have been together for 28 years and have gone through and witnessed massive transformation in ourselves and in the other. As our frequency resonance has risen, how we each view intimate partnership has changed, and how we are in our partnership has shifted significantly. We definitely still have lots to learn, and along the way, we have learned a lot about how to navigate the humanness that we are in our spirit journeys. Today, Chris and I will be giving our take on intimate partnership, and I'm curious to see where this conversation goes. And after the discussion, we get to the most important part of this episode. The group frequency calibration associated with this episode is where the frequency work happens and where change actually occurs. So be sure to listen to that. Without releasing distortion patterns targeted by the GFC, the change you want will be more difficult to attain because you haven't addressed the root of the issue. So let's get going.
So the first question we get here is, what's the number one obstacle you faced before frequency work as a couple, and what has changed since then?
Well, to answer that question, I actually feel like it's an individual answer because I think as much as we are a couple, we are individuals within the couple.
For
And I
sure.
feel like it was more about what are the things that we each had challenges with individually that impacted the coupledom.
Right.
If you want to think of it that way, or the mastermind. Um, because as many of you know, as soon as you have two people together, you've formed a mastermind. So an intimate partnership is a higher level or more intensive mastermind.
Hmm.
So for me personally, the things that I was the most challenged with, which I think impacted the way we were together the most, there's so many things, but the ones I think that probably um, were the most difficult for me and for you in relationship with me probably were it was really hard for me to be still because I was so driven. So I would always just drive us to work all the time. And that's because I had a lot of scarcity stuff.
Hmm.
So the fear of not having enough really drove me. And I think it was really hard for you to be with that because your pace is slower than
Slower than
mine
yours, yeah.
by a good margin. And when you have somebody that's as strong as a driver as I am, fueled by fear, it's very unpleasant, I think, to
Yeah.
be around. And the pace gets really, really, really high because it's frenetic. And that was, I think, one of the biggest challenges before frequency work that we had in our partnership is
Yeah.
me in terms of my ability to like be still.
Right.
I can,
And with no obvious solution either, because it wasn't really about a matter of how much we actually had. It
yeah,
just simply was there was never enough. So there
yeah.
was never going to be enough because it just that's the energy that's behind that level of scarcity type of
Yeah.
thing.
So those patterns were super deep,
Yeah.
super old from my lineage and culture and that type of thing.
Hmm.
So once I started to release those, then I actually was able to drop into more stillness
Right.
and also be able to hold my space, meaning I wasn't like pushing into yours as much
Right.
as
Which is
my understanding.
in
Yeah.
a way like almost like an attempt to control,
Yeah.
right? I mean, really, because that the fear leads to the control because
Yeah.
you want to sort out all the variables to make sure
Yeah.
there's going to be enough, and
Yeah.
one of the variables is my husband doing enough, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's not just my husband, it's anyone
yeah,
around me doing
exactly,
enough. And you happen to be closest. So
right.
unfortunately for you, we were also, just for people who don't know us, we were running another business together. So Chris and I were in real estate together
Hmm.
for a long time. And um, so we've been in partnership together, not only intimately, but also in business for many years.
Yeah,
And so uh,
like over 20 now.
over 20,
Yeah,
yeah. And so as a result, I mean, that's our business partnership. We've been an intimate partnership for almost 30.
yeah,
So it's been a really long time. And so anyway, once I was able to hold my space, because a lot of people, so if you don't know what holding your space is, please watch, I think it's episode 122, Steady She Goes, Hold Your Space. Um, Holding your space is not only about people coming into you, meaning not having them impact how you feel, but
hmm,
just as a reminder, it's about not bleeding out of your own space and trying to control someone else.
right.
So I couldn't do that at all because I had so much fear distortion running through me of not having enough. So as a result, it really drove you in terms of the pacing, and also I couldn't be still. So
Yeah.
not much fun, or
Right.
not as much anyway. Fun. It's not like we didn't have
Yeah, of
fun.
course.
We
There was tons of fun,
fun.
but at the same time, there
Yeah.
were lost opportunities for like more play and more like a lighter, easier time as well.
Yeah, exactly. And also for Chris, it was like he would have to, because it was so intense, you would often have to like step away a little bit
Yeah.
from the relationship, not in terms of sexually with another partner, but just, go on your own adventures or
Right.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that actually, I mean, from my take, that is actually still important, anyways. I mean, I think
Totally.
maybe different people have different levels of need for that, but I know for me personally, I need to just have my own space sometimes, just to do absolutely nothing. It's nothing important, or it's not like
Yeah.
significant what I'm doing. It just need to be on my own rhythm, my own pace. Especially because, as you mentioned, we have very different timings, and I think we
Mhm.
had a different, or I don't know if it's a different episode we did or something, or I don't know. It's come up before. We're talking about different people's approach to time, and like
Mhm.
some people take two, like you take 2 minutes to like get engaged on some new thing, and it takes me like 2 days, and other people will
Mhm.
be 2 weeks, and so you need to sort of calibrate around that.
Yeah.
And if we're working at the common denominator pace, sometimes we need to step back and have our own pace as
Yeah,
well,
to
right?
reset. It's really important. I feel
Yeah.
like that's a really big game changer for a lot of people. If for those of you out there in intimate partnership, it's to honor that part of holding your space is to understand the other person's rhythm and
Hmm.
timing. And if there's, like you said, a common denominator where you speed up and I slow down, it's really important to have these little breaks where you can be in your own time,
Sort of natural
your
rhythm.
own natural
Yeah.
rhythm, because that helps you reset
Yeah.
and center in a different way than when you're together in a mastermind. I feel like it's really helpful,
Yeah.
and it helps you feel more nourished and able to come back into the partnership in a way that feels good to you,
Right.
as opposed to like you're always like if you're the person who's a little bit slower, and there's nothing slower sounds bad, but it's just that's your rhythm.
Right.
You feel like you're being dragged, and the person who's going slow is like, oh my God, speed up.
Right.
So at least when you're in these moments of time where you have your own rhythm, it feels like, okay, now I can come back into this common denominator in a way
Yeah.
that feels good. Yeah.
Totally. And for me, it's like actually this segues into one of the challenges I always had, which was holding a boundary
Hmm.
because I had a sort of, I don't know if it's that I didn't know who I was exactly or whatever, but it's just I had to sort of,
You're very empathic.
I
Yeah.
guess I'm pretty empathic. I feel other
Yeah.
people a lot, and so it was sometimes hard for me to be certain of where my boundary was,
Hmm.
and simultaneously I was running a lot of patterns of self-sacrifice.
Hmm.
So what would happen is I would someone would ask something of me, whether it's you or anyone else, they'd ask, and so I wasn't clear on where my boundary was, so I'd just say yes, and I'd say yes, and I'd say yes, and I'd say yes, until it got to the point where I felt like I was actually literally being drained or extracted from. I would endure it for a long, long time, even though I felt not so good about it because I was
Yeah.
running self-sacrifice patterns.
Yeah.
And then eventually, what would happen is it would feel so extractive, wi- not because of the person doing it, but because I kept on saying yes, 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 well beyond the place where it was reasonable to keep on giving.
Hmm.
And eventually, I would just like go into a rage because I was like, this person's taking so much from me.
Yeah.
But the thing was, I was the one who kept on
Well, it
extending
was you
without,
weren't
because I
you
wasn't
weren't
holding a
holding your
boundary
space.
and I
Yeah.
wasn't being clear on what was okay for me, what wasn't okay for me, and I just didn't even know to do that really.
Hmm.
And it just was an automatic reaction at some point where it felt like so much was being taken from me. Like, how could they take so much from me? But the
Yeah.
thing is, well, because I said yes all the time.
Yeah.
But I wasn't realizing that like it wasn't about that person asking. It was about me not knowing when to set up a boundary and say, oh no, I'm not okay with that anymore.
Yeah. And even I feel like just internally being strong enough to know where your end was and there was.
Yeah.
And it's not even I mean, I know you've been talking about it as setting a boundary. Yes, there's a setting a boundary, but also I feel personally, my experience of you anyway,
Hmm.
is that you're very aware of your internal space, meaning like you're aware of your spirit body. So when people come into it, even me, you're like, no,
Mm.
it's like
Well,
when you
now
feel,
maybe,
yeah, now,
but
that's what I'm
not
saying.
before. Yeah.
Before, you couldn't tell that, right?
Yeah.
So it wasn't even about, I mean, yes, it was about setting boundaries, but that was an extension of you couldn't tell
Yeah.
where you were. Like
Right.
you had a more what we call a fuzzy sense of self, which is another episode. If you don't know what a fuzzy sense of self is and the consequences of that, please check out that other episode. It is important. But that's what would happen is for you,
Right.
you had a fuzzier sense of self.
Right.
And so therefore, it was harder for you to know where you were and even to set a boundary, because how do you set a boundary if you don't even know where you are?
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that was hard. And what would happen is like between you and me, what would happen is that I would without even you knowing it,
Mhm.
actually without me knowing it, until it got to the point where I would be angry,
Yeah.
I would just I would give beyond what I thought, what I wanted to do. So you would ask, hey, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And I'd keep on saying yes, 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 yes. And then at some point I'd be like, will you stop asking me to do stuff? And and you're like, where did that come from? Like,
Yeah.
why you turn into a
Yeah.
maniac all of a sudden? And so, um, like having that sense of self really, which developed through doing all the frequency work,
Mhm.
it's been a really amazing transformation. It has helped me be able to assess way sooner,
Mhm.
am I okay with that? Is
Mhm.
I feel like that's too much.
Mhm.
Not just with you. This is just. I mean, this is we're talking in the context of our partnership, but it goes. I mean, it was the same with any other person anywhere. It wasn't really about a partnership. It was just about my relationship to anything outside of myself.
Mhm.
And now I have a much greater sense of like where that boundary is, and with fewer self-sacrifice patterns, it doesn't. I don't have a sense that if I don't like that being kind has to mean I need to deplete myself in some way or give too much of myself.
Mhm.
So you can still be super compassionate, super kind, and that sort of stuff, but just know like that there's a limit, and you don't need to injure yourself in order to be kind to someone else. That's not really being kind. That's something else altogether. That's being a martyr.
Yeah.
And so I think that's changed a lot.
Yeah. And it's interesting because you would think that as a result of that, I would get more angry or something, I
Mm,
imagine, or something like this, because you're holding your space
yeah.
differently or whatever. But because we were both changing in different ways,
Hmm.
and I was learning to hold my space better, and you were holding your space better
Right.
too, but in different
In different
ways,
ways. Yeah. Exactly.
actually.
You from going out and me
When you
from
from
like
coming,
yeah.
allowing coming in. So what happened is that I feel like we've always had a very great respect for each other,
Hmm.
and also a real desire to have ourselves be the best that we are and the other.
Right.
And so I feel like that's gotten stronger because, and it's really good because it's a really, I feel for me, um, you're very clear where I do bleed out of holding my space.
Right.
And I feel it immediately because I feel it in you.
Yeah.
And so it's a really good, fast, like
Like
mirror
feedback. Yeah.
feedback on how um, when I'm not holding my space
Right.
appropriately. So I feel like that's really helpful and
And
really different.
I want to point out that
Yeah.
so you're talking about it as far as like you're really good at feeling me, like feeling that about me, and I'm feeling it. So if you're not if you're someone who doesn't have that level of like intuition or sort of that sense about the other person, another way to approach that is just using proper like good
Oh,
communication,
for sure.
like clear communication, instead of just like what used to happen was I would get angry, and then of course once I'm angry, then you're going to respond to my anger, and
Yeah,
it's not
it's bad.
likely to be very good, right? It's hard to turn that into a really nice scenario,
Yeah.
but if you can use communication, a communication style that's not combative,
Mhm.
like did you may not know, but when you do this, I feel this way, or things like
Mhm.
that. That's not an accusation of you. That's just
Mhm.
informing you that when you do this, I feel this. And there's no disputing that I feel this. So
Mhm.
that's one way for people who aren't like so keyed into how other people feel,
Mhm.
to approach things is like uh, just be very like gentle in communications
Yeah, and I would say that that's
and
true. Even
thoughtful.
yeah, and I agree. And I think that even with people like us who are intuitive about the other, communication is really key because you can make all kinds of assumptions,
Yeah.
or you have your own patterns which are filtering your response. So I think it's really important, irrespective of how intuitive you are or what level you're at, to actually communicate verbally
Yeah.
in a way
For
that,
sure.
and it's what,
Mindfully.
yeah, mindfully,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think what the other benefit of frequency work in the change of who we are
Yeah.
is, for me, and you mentioned not taking things so personally, I
Yeah.
would say the same is for me as well.
Mm,
So that if you're saying something to me and you're like, hey, like you're trying to, like, why are you trying to get in my space or whatever? It's instead of taking it personally, which I would have before,
right.
like I got hurt feelings, like now you're angry at me, like
Yeah.
what a jerk, whatever it is,
Right.
because I've become a lot stronger and because of the change in me in terms of my frequency resonance, I take that as like, oh, wait a minute. It's not so much about you. It's like,
Hmm.
it's about me.
Yeah.
Like, what is, oh, okay, that was a little bit of a check there. So instead of getting angry at you, which
Right.
might be a common response
Yeah.
before,
Like very automatic.
very
Like
automatic, like you're a jerk, like
yeah.
you're whatever. I'm like, wait a minute. He's telling me that because I
Yeah.
have overstepped. Like I am not being mindful.
Yeah.
I am bleeding outside of my space. Okay, let's pull all that back in, be aware of myself, come back to my center. So
Yeah.
meaning that I'm more aware faster of what's happening. I'm more neutral and I'm more distant from my thoughts and emotions. So instead of taking it personally,
Right.
I'm able to receive that as constructive criticism to be able to
And see if there's some
correct.
truth in that, right? Because I
Exactly.
mean, when someone else says something to you, that it may or may not be like true, reasonable, whatever. Like
Hmm.
that you don't, they're not. It's not necessarily correct just because someone says something,
Yeah.
but it also may be there may be something to it. So
Yeah.
it's like if you can have that distance from your immediate reaction, as
Hmm.
long if you have that little break in there, little space, because you can maintain some level of observer, then you can assess like what is there? Is there a kernel of truth in that?
Exactly.
And then that's another. I think there might have been another question. So we'll just something about. I actually don't know. Remember what the question is. I was going to read it later, but uh, in this same discussion, it's an understanding that whenever there's an issue, even though a lot of times like the very ego driven or not the very ego based sort of response to something is to think everything is someone else's like problem or fault or whatever,
Hmm.
but I think part of doing the frequency work too is just remembering that we are creators of our world, whether we're doing it consciously or unconsciously, and when things show up that are crunchy, it's not always someone else's fault. Oftentimes,
Yeah.
very often, it's
Almost always.
almost always it's something to do with us too.
Yes.
And so it's like I think there are a million examples of that, but it's like remembering that I am a primary player in my world, regardless of what's going on. And a lot of people are running victim patterns, which I think I used to run a little bit too sometimes, where you look out at the world and the filter is everyone's doing something to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, when you're seeing through that filter, it's very hard to see like, oh, I may be having something to do with it too.
Hmm.
Even if all it is, my only role in it is running distortion patterns of victimhood,
Hmm.
which is then being broadcast out and then attracting that sort of energy back.
Hmm.
And then again, it's not a blame thing. I'm not blaming victims. There's no like, but that's not what I'm saying at all. I mean, if people are doing bad stuff to you, they're doing bad stuff to you. However, like there's always some level of responsibility, and that's one of the major distortion patterns that can come up for people is that of victim. And when you're like, that's just what you're calling in, whether you know it or not. And so, um, taking personal accountability is huge, and remembering that you're always playing a role. I mean, I guess the old expression is it takes two to tango,
Hmm.
but it is true. Like if there's an altercation, it involves two people, and doing the frequency work has allowed me at least to look at myself and say, what role have I played in this? What patterns am I running that have caused this? Or what am I, even before I knew about patterns, I guess I would even say like, what habits do I have, or what worldview do I have, or outlooks do I have that are causing me to see things this way?
Yeah.
And the more any individual in a partnership can take responsibility for what's happening, the better it is, as opposed to looking for, oh, you did this to me and you did this, and like then it's just a blame back and forth, and there's no winning in that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Another question was, how has our relationship changed as how has your relationship changed as your frequency resonance has risen?
I think we sort of answered that a little
Yeah,
bit
I
because
think
we went on
that's
a long
a long
tangent there.
tangent.
So yeah, so I think we've answered that, and I would
Hmm.
say that I would say that we're much more. I think our relationship is stronger
For sure.
because we as individuals are stronger,
Absolutely.
like much, much, much more so.
Yeah.
I think we have a lot more clarity around, or maybe I shouldn't speak for you. For me, I would say that I have more clarity um, around my own space. I am aware when I need help or like and need help. That sounds like a funny thing to say, but it's sort of like sometimes there are moments in my humanness
Hmm.
where it's helpful to have somebody mirror being really present. Okay, so we all go through periods of crunchiness or detox or whatever it is.
Hmm.
And it's not that I need you exactly, but by you just being fully
Right.
present, it reminds me, oh, that's right. That's where
Right.
present
So
is.
what you're saying is you don't need me to provide a solution,
That's correct.
right? So you're not like needing me as like I got to do something. It's just simply if in this kind of scenario, if
Mhm.
I'm fully present, that being heard and having that sort of present presence and the connection helps you process whatever is
Yeah,
going on with
and
you.
it's just faster,
Yeah.
right? So it just helps. We can all get back to center. We all can do it in different ways.
Yeah.
Um, what I found is that sometimes if I just reference you, I'm like, oh, that's right, he's in center. Oh, I know how to get back into center.
Yeah.
I just entrain myself back into center. Does
Right.
that make sense? So it's
Yeah.
like a reference point
Yeah.
that I've forgotten for just a wee second there.
Right. Right.
I'm just like in my humanness, and then I'm like, oh, right, okay,
Yeah.
right, he's in center. Okay, right now I'm going to bring myself back into center.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful.
It is, and it's like that's something that I think has changed. So the question is like, how has relationship changed? I'm also able to be more present.
Mhm.
than I used to be as well.
Mhm.
As you get more solid internally, somehow or other that allows you to be more, or allows me, has allowed me to be more in the 0 point more often, so that when I'm listening, I'm just listening. And also, what I've noticed is that I think this might be tend to be a masculine
Mhm.
trait. So not necessarily, I'm not talking just specifically men, but like the masculine
So,
trait
yeah.
will be try to solve problems.
Mhm.
And so sometimes what I've learned, and I don't even know if it's exactly a frequency work thing, but I've just simply learned that sometimes when you're coming to me with concerns or an issue or something, sometimes you're actually looking for input as far as like, can you help me solve the problem? Other
Mhm.
times you just simply want to have someone be there, have me be there and just hear you.
Mhm.
And so that's the one thing I've noticed that like, with our relationship as well that's very important is for me as a masculine like person running mostly masculine traits or whatever, masculine energy, to know when I'm trying to solve a problem and when it's time just to listen.
Mhm.
Because sometimes it feels like foisting. Also, if I'm trying to solve a problem and you don't really want me to solve a problem,
Oh, I
you know
see.
what I mean? You're kind of
Yeah.
like, I don't want any solutions right now. I just want to be heard. So that's a thing that I've noticed that help make our relationship better. Was it
Yeah.
me distinguishing like sometimes when you want one thing or you want the other.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's helpful, but
Yeah.
um, what's the best thing and also the hardest thing about doing frequency work as a couple?
Uh, well, I would say the hardest thing is if you're both detoxing at the same time.
It's true. It's not awesome.
It's terrible. Because, well, especially if you happen to be people like us. So, if meaning the sense that we feel the other person,
Hmm.
right? So, awareness of the other person. So, it has been where sometimes, like, I feel you being upset, but you think I'm upset with you. So it's like, do you see it? Like we're feeling each other's like
Right, right.
upsettedness, and we're in detox, both of us, and it just can get messy.
Mhm, yeah, kinda
That's
crunchy and
can
stuff.
get really crunchy,
Yeah,
and so that's probably that's not great.
yeah,
That's the hardest thing about, I would say. What was the question? It was the most challenging thing of
yeah.
um,
What's the
but
best thing and then the
but
hardest
best thing
thing?
about doing frequency
Yeah.
work. But what I will say is the best thing from my perspective is that because you're in a mastermind together,
Mhm.
if you're both doing it, the acceleration can be enormous. That's been in my experience of it, and that the other person understands when you're going through detox
Yeah,
and can hold their space better when you're doing it. So if you're going through a crunchy period, I say, is there anything that I can do for you? Do you need my help in any way? And if the
yeah,
answer is no, I'm like, okay,
okay, yeah,
okay. If you need it, I'm here. If you don't,
yeah,
you go through whatever you need to go through. And likewise. And I feel like what's really lovely about frequency work is that you don't take that personally. Like, I'm not like, oh my God, he doesn't love me because he's not helping me. Like, I don't expect you to rescue me. I'm
mhm,
just like, okay, he's asked me, he's here for me. I actually don't have an action for him to do
right,
because really this is my thing to sort out. I appreciate the willingness, but I don't take it personally that you're not like swooping in to save the day. Does that make
right.
sense?
Yep,
So I feel like that's the best thing. I don't know if you have anything
yeah.
different to add to
The only thing I'll add to that is that, one thing I don't know if it's the best thing, I don't know, but
that.
one thing I really do appreciate is sometimes when there are detoxy, sort of crunchy periods,
Yeah.
I think I'm especially susceptible to it more than you are perhaps, which is that I get into a state where everything seems like it sucks, and I don't. It's almost like there's some level of inertia there that's keeping me stuck in this stuckness, and I don't really want to solve it. It's like I just want to like there's something about this like everything sucks. I just want to stay there, and you're like, hey, wouldn't it be better if you did this? I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. But the only reason I mean, it's true. Like if you like 100% true that what you just suggested would it make me feel better, but I sometimes just don't want to do it. I don't want to receive that information because like I don't know what I'm just in that state. And
Yeah.
so what I appreciate, and it's a very very fine line because another thing we could talk about is trying to control the other,
Hmm.
and when you think you know what's best. So if I'm in a crunchy state, detoxing, and you're like, will you please just go outside and do something or whatever, go for a motorcycle ride or just go in the garage and do something. You know it's true.
Hmm.
From past experience, you've seen it a million times. I'm in this state. I need to do something different because I'm a person who does things. I don't need to think differently because I'm already in a yucky place thinking. I need to go do, and you're familiar with that. You're aware of that, and so you are trying to remind me that that's so, but without trying to control me. And it's a very fine line. And I
It's a
think you're
fine
actually
line.
really, really good at it,
Yeah.
and getting better,
Yeah.
so that you're able to somehow get me to recognize that I really do need to do something else
Yeah.
to change my state. without making me feel like you're trying to make me do something.
Yeah.
Because that is another thing that can easily happen in relationships is trying to control the other person, right? And
Yes.
that's part of holding your space, like we talked about.
Yep.
And it happens all the time because, and it happens not only in your personal, like your intimate partnership or whatever. It happens with friends and family too, where you think you know what's best for them, and you can be 100%. You may actually be right. You may think that you know what's best for them, but it's not quite true. Also, you never know. But it's like, where do you stop from suggesting? There's a line between suggesting and recommending, and then trying to like cause something to happen. And it's like it's important sort of to feel that out in all your relationships to make sure that you're not going beyond that level of like, hey, if you want my opinion, I'm here. Just ask me. I mean, that's very, very like leaving it to the other person. And then there's the you should do this, and then that's very controlling.
Yeah, and I would say for those of you who are in intimate partnerships and feel like you know what's best because you can see it in the other person and you've done it in the past, or you can very clearly see what the better trajectory would be if they just simply shifted in such and such a way. So for those of you who want to know how I do that, the most important thing is to hold your space. So be completely neutral in whether or not you take my suggestion.
Right.
So it's like, hey, I noticed that you seem to be struggling a bit. Have you noticed that? And even in you saying, yes, I'm in a crunchy space, it like takes you out of it a little bit.
Right.
Okay. Because you've done enough frequency work that you're like
You
aware
have
of
some level of observer, even when you're really in it.
Yeah, exactly. I'll say like, in the past, it's been really helpful if you've done this, or, often it helps when you do this.
Which is just a fact.
Yeah,
right?
which is just true. Like there's nothing to debate because it's often happened.
Yeah.
And I'll say like, you may want to consider doing that. But if you don't, that's okay. You can stay in this for as long as you like.
So I have the freedom to stay in the yucky place if I want to.
And I actually say you can stay in here for as long as you're not. And I'm not threatening you with it. I'm just saying you absolutely 100% can be in your yucky state. Maybe I'll leave for a little bit. For as long as you like. But you really have to be mindful of yourself and say it without it being loaded. Meaning that you're not trying to do it to get them to change. It's like, for real, this is an option for you. If you don't choose it, it's your choice. And what you're saying is, it is your choice. So you're reminding the person it is your choice.
Which also is like, it actually tells me that I have a choice. I can choose like, door A, which is yucky, and door B, which is better.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's like at some point, the individual, it's kind of obvious that they should choose door B.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you were single, what would you be looking for in someone else?
Oh, do you want to answer that, or do you want me to answer that first?
Well, the answer for me is really easy, actually, which is just simply like, I think some people go into it, when they're looking for a relationship, they have sort of a list of criteria. And I want the person to be this, 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 this. And it's like, some of it is just like about attraction, like what you feel attracted to. Others is like a mental idea of like, this is what a person should be, and this is what the ideal partner would be. And I personally don't operate like that. I mean, for me,
they should look like this. They should be doing this.
I mean, but for me, it's just simply like, I would just like feel how I feel about that person. Sort of, and with there being a distinction between like sexual attraction and like connection, like emotional, and like, I don't even know the right words exactly, but feeling that there's a certain like amount of similarity and overlap, so that it'd be a really, really fun, like there's potential for a lot of fun and a lot of play in the relationship. That's really what I would be looking for, I think, was just like, okay, there's gonna have to be a spark of attraction, but that's not enough to make a good relationship. I mean, that's purely physical. Is like, where's that like sympathy is a word that is not the right word. Synergy. Okay, that's a good word. Yeah. Like, where's this like just feeling like, wow, there's a great amount of synergy here together. That's what I would be looking for.
Yeah. So if I were single like me now, what would I be looking for? Well, I feel like I'm very different from you, right? So I have a different thing. So one of my most important things is the person makes me laugh. That's like, it's always been my number one thing. You make me laugh all the time. It's amazing. I love it.
And thankfully, it's very easy to make you laugh, actually.
It's true.
Just want to point that out. So I was like,
actually, it's funny, when I was dating in my early 20s, my sister was saying to me, like, if some guy can't make you laugh, Karen, it's like really sad. Because I laugh really easily. So anyway, so making me laugh is important. So meaning like that there's fun, right? That level of funniness. And I think for me that it's funny, a lot of people ask, do they have to be doing frequency work? Actually, I wouldn't necessarily look for that. For me, it has to do with how present is the person with me. Like, how present can they be with me? Are they looking at the phone? Like, how can they be with me? And do they have the openness and the curiosity to grow?
Right.
Is growth something that they're looking for? To me, that's critical. And that's
Totally.
something that we didn't know we were looking for in each other, but that has been what has
Coincidentally, that was
what's
important to both
important
of
to
us.
both of us.
Yeah.
And that is what's why we've been together for almost 30 years, because we've been growing at such a tremendous rate.
The
Like
whole time.
who we were at the beginning, or even like 3 years ago, is totally different from who we are now.
Yeah.
So to me, I would be looking for somebody who is growth oriented, because to me, it's not important that a person matches my resonance right away. It has to do with, can they hold presence?
Hmm.
Like, is it important for them to hold presence with me? And do they have the curiosity and the openness to want to come up to my level?
Right.
Right? Because I mean, I don't mean to say that in a way that's self-aggrandizing, but we've been doing a lot of work. We've cleared a
A lot of
lot,
stuff.
a lot of stuff. So most people are not quite at the same level
Yeah.
of frequency resonance that we are, and so that's what I would be looking for.
Yeah.
Just because I know that's what a lot of women are asking.
Right.
Like, what happens? Like, do I have to only look for men doing frequency work? No, 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 no,
Right.
no, not at all.
Yeah, but the openness to change is imperative. Also,
Yes.
because if there's a partnership and one person is doing the frequency work and one is not, the one who's doing the frequency work is likely to be changing
Faster,
faster than the one who's
much
not.
faster.
And if the one who's not is not open to just change in general,
Mhm.
if keeping things exactly the same is one of their like strongest needs,
It's not going to
it's
work.
not going to work.
It's
So
not
they
going to
have
work.
to be able to flex and like work with to grow with how the other person is changing.
Yeah.
That's really key.
That's
Yeah.
right. And I would say that, and that would be for me what I would be looking for. And
Yeah.
self-awareness actually is the other
Yeah.
thing, because the self-awareness accountability piece doesn't require frequency work.
Right.
It requires introspection and a desire to do that.
Right.
And so I think that if you have that, that's great. You don't
Yeah.
need to, you know what I mean? Have done all the frequency work. You don't need to be doing it.
Right.
You just have to. To me, that's what I would be looking for
Yeah.
if I were single.
I realize also, as we were talking,
Mhm.
like for me, I would also be looking for certain attributes too. Like for number one for me is kindness.
Yeah.
Like I really want the other person that I'm with to be kind. And
Yeah.
that's like so I would probably just think of like what attributes are important to me because those things aren't likely to change.
Mhm.
Like even as frequency work, if people are going to do frequency work together, yes, they're going to change. They're not likely to change their very core nature of how they relate to other people and stuff like that. For people seeking an intimate partnership of a higher order, one of the questions we get asked most is, should I clear myself completely of distortions so so I know that whoever I attract will be more highly resonating?
Yeah. So a lot of people who come to me looking for intimate partnership feel like they have to like clear all their
Like they
distortion
have to
patterns.
finish
They have to
completely.
finish themselves
Yeah.
completely, and then they're going to be at enough of a resonance that they can then attract somebody who they're looking for, the one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I totally understand that rationale. I don't think it's required, because you have, first of all, there's a certain level of control there that you have to be aware of, right? Because you're thinking, okay, well, if I'm settled, then I'm all sorted and everything's tucked away and all nicely completed. Then I'm going to attract the one, right? The one
Right.
who's going to be with me for the rest of my life. It's going to be glorious, etc. So what I would suggest is that partnership, a lot of people have certain ideas about what partnership is. And I think that partnership, even if it's a short one, can teach you a lot, right? Like, even if you're together with them for like a couple of weeks, you can learn a lot from that person. And you don't have to, there's this like cultural mindset that you have to be together with the one forever.
Right.
So I don't feel like, first of all, you're never complete with releasing all of your stuff, because you're human, and part of your journey is to clarify in order to have who you truly are, which is infinite, indestructible consciousness in embodiment, experiencing life.
Hmm.
And intimate partnership just makes that mirror stronger, so you can have a different experience of what I just said.
Right.
So my short answer is no, you don't need to clear all of your stuff. As you clear more of your stuff, will you attract different people? Yes. Are they necessarily going to be in the package that you desire? Because some people think, okay, well, then I'm going to get my list.
Yeah.
If I clear myself up, I'm going to get the list that I want. That's not necessarily what is going to help
Right.
you grow. Somebody who's not your list, in
Right.
fact, might actually be the person who helps you grow the most.
Right. Well, especially because your list is like basically conditioned by all the distortion patterns you're running.
Yeah.
So, and with anything that you want or desire, that changes as your frequency resonance rises because it's less informed by the lower resonating distortions that we all run until we start doing stuff to clear them out.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say, no, you don't need to, because whoever, as you clear more of your distortions, the people who come into your life for intimate partnership will be there to help you grow as you continue in your journey. So my feeling is you don't need to. Some people take that approach, but it's not required.
Right. Okay, another question was, do I need to be celibate during this cleanup period when I do frequency work? So it's kind of like a follow-up question to the
Yeah.
previous one.
No, you don't. I think it's important to be mindful who you're sleeping with, because if you're having sex with somebody, then you are enmeshing yourself in their frequency resonance. If you get stronger and stronger, their frequency resonance doesn't impact you as much
Because you're holding your
because
space
you're holding
better.
your space better. If you've just started on your journey, I would recommend you don't have to be celibate forever, but just as you're in this period of detox, chances are, first of all, you're not going to want to be enmeshed so much in other people, but to be, especially if you tend to be somebody who does enmesh yourself, to be mindful of who you're choosing
Yeah.
to be intimate with and when. But I certainly don't think you need to be celibate. I think you can learn a lot from exchanges like that.
Yeah.
But to be mindful of how much you can hold your own space before
Yeah.
you choose to do that.
Right.
That
And
would be my answer.
intentionally do it as best you can.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep.
Okay. And I think the last question, or maybe the last question is, what would your advice be for someone who is in intimate partnership with someone who is not doing frequency work and may not be changing at the same rate or have the same goals?
Yeah. So I'm going to add another question to that, which is, do both people in the intimate partnership need to be doing frequency work in
Yeah.
order for the one who is to accelerate? So the answer is no, you don't both need to be doing frequency work in order for the one doing frequency work to accelerate, because that's a
Hmm.
question we often get.
Yeah.
Um, Especially if the partner, again, is present, self-aware and accountable, and growth oriented.
Right.
So meaning that they can pace with you, right? So they don't
As you
have,
change.
as you change,
Yeah.
yes. So they don't have to be doing exactly what you're doing in order to be those things. That's just part of who they are.
Yeah.
If you have that, then it's not required at all, because they may be doing their own thing, which is
Hmm.
great and really nourishing for the relationship. If you have somebody, though, who is trying to hold on to you as
Yeah.
a certain fixed idea of what they prefer because they've known you as that person for a long period of
Right.
time, it's going to be more painful for
Right.
them, because the rate of growth that you will experience and they will experience through you
Yeah.
probably will be crunchy for them. It's going to be a little
Absolutely.
chaotic.
Yeah. I mean, if certainty is one of their highest needs and things are changing around them, that really that triggers a lot of their anxieties and sort of other low resonating stuff.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
can be really, really challenging if the person that they are looking for stability is changing.
Yeah. And the other thing is that in a partnership, as as let us say you, the person doing the frequency work gets stronger and stronger, the other person leans into them more for stability.
Hmm.
Like, it leans into you,
Right.
meaning you're, because you're getting stronger, brighter, etc. The other person will lean into you. For you, it's about, well, how do you feel about that? And
Hmm.
it may be just a conversation like, hey, you're leaning into my space. I'd
Yeah.
really appreciate it if you, whatever, you can have a communication about that. Without the frequency work paradigm, it's harder for them to understand what that means,
Yeah.
but they can still get it. I think it just takes more mindfulness around communication, but it's still possible. It's just, it can be something that is a little trickier to navigate. It can be
Right.
done. And then there are relationships where you're together in partnership and the certainty, other person's need for certainty is so great
Yeah.
that it breaks the relationship.
Yeah.
And that has happened.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
for sure, I think if someone really wants to take off with frequency work, they have to at least be willing to consider that the relationships need to change in order to really allow that. I mean, I think some people are afraid, like, oh, if I allow myself to grow, then I'm going to lose that partner.
Hmm.
And it's just putting it out there that sometimes that may actually be the best thing for someone,
Hmm.
for everyone.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's not just intimate partners; it's like friends, family,
Yeah.
etc. Because sometimes those patterns that those people bind us in
Yeah.
aren't really helpful to us. It makes them feel better. It makes us feel nice because we were all accustomed to the roles that we play,
Right.
but it doesn't allow you to actually grow, ascend, awaken, which may be what if you're watching this, what your higher self is calling for.
Yeah.
So sometimes change is required, and it doesn't mean that those people will never come back into your life necessarily. They may or they may not.
Right.
But as what a natural consequence of releasing the distortion patterns, you become sort of more aware of who you are and what it is that you are, and you're not willing to sacrifice that so
Right.
much for someone's ease and comfort about their story about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thanks, Karen. That was really great. I really enjoyed our conversation. I hope all you guys do too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are watching, if you want to comment below on whether you enjoyed this particular episode and if you'd like to hear more about our take on intimate relationship, please go ahead and just comment below so we can take a look at that. And don't forget to listen to the group frequency calibration at the end, which will help you to start to release those distortion patterns, which prevent you from making your intimate partnership even better or prevent you from meeting the partner that you hope for. We're about to start the group frequency calibration, or GFC, where we actually do the frequency work and where change is catalyzed. To get to the GFC, click on the square that'll appear to the right or the link in the description below. It's time to bring in a new experience, a new consciousness, and a new world. Let's rise together.